If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do so now. And if you think that you are subscribed, check to make sure. YouTube loves to unsubscribe my people all the freaking time. And a lot of people who thought they were subscribed mysteriously wind up unsubscribed. Also, if you're not following me on Twitter, the link is going to be in the description. Now, that said, you can tell that the black media is firmly asserting its place in the current presidential primaries by how the white media is attempting to slant their reporting of the Democratic primary. This is not white media coverage, it's a white media cover-up. Mike Bloomberg is getting black support despite Stop and Frisk. This is what the white media is trying to put out, because they understand exactly how this is going. These are the policies that white supremacy needs to hold in place in order to justify the militarized oppression of black people. See, the black media has been out here telling the truth about Michael Bloomberg for years now and making this into a millstone around his neck. As I told you, the black media and black empowerment in general, we, as intelligent black society, would not come into our own until we could prove that we could exert power over white political candidates. And that's what we have done with Mike Bloomberg. Right out of the gate, he's been crippled. It wasn't the white media that brought up all of his stop and frisk sins. It was black voices online who did that. Because we've been talking about this for the whole longest doggone time. It wasn't CNN, obviously, who brought it up. It wasn't MSNBC. Well, so much for Joy Reid. She's been carrying water for these scumbags. So they were not going to do anything. Wasn't roly-poly. It wasn't any of the old dead black media, all these charlatans and frauds who have been exposed. They've been trying to put a nice fresh coat of paint to whitewash away this racism from Michael Bloomberg and try to get black folks back on the political treadmill. But they're saying it's not working. So what they're saying is, well, black people are supporting Mike Bloomberg despite Stop and Frisk. Now, look at the wording that they use. This is a classic of weasel words. Mike Bloomberg getting black support. Whoa, black support? What does that mean? Does that mean that Michael Steele and the Republicans are supporting him? Does that mean that Alan Keyes is supporting him? Does it mean that Colin Powell? When you say black support, what does that even mean? Notice how they don't say black voters. Now, they're going to try to insinuate that later on, but I'm going to go ahead and break that down and tear apart that lie. But let's go ahead and look at what the white media points to, because surely if Michael Bloomberg's getting all this support despite Stop and Frisk, obviously it must be coming from black voters, right? I mean, it's not like it's coming from a bunch of people who are out of touch inside the Beltway or anything. Oh, wait. All last year, when I was chronicling Joe Biden's bumbling into the presidential race and his cratering poll numbers among black people, whenever the white media would report about Joe Biden as they were desperately trying to manufacture the lie that he had all this black support that simply didn't exist, the white media had a standard template for their stories. You start off by talking about the black person in the street who didn't really know much about politics or hadn't been following it that closely, or maybe they sat out the 2016 election. Or maybe they had a low opinion of the Democrats and felt they were out of touch, but this black person was warming to Joe Biden. It would usually be some campaign staffer, be one of the usual suspects, or it'd be one of these black Boule University bootlicks, something like that. That's what they would try to do. They would try to manufacture some phony baloney pretend black person in the street who they would be trying to claim just apparently was taking a warming to Joe Biden. That was the template they would use. You start off with that because that's who you're trying to reach. That's who you're trying to influence with the story. You're trying to say, hey, here's some black person who you have something in common with. And well, they thought the same thing as you. But you know what? They decided this election's too important not to get back on the white political treadmill. That's the template that they used all last year. But it didn't help Joe Biden's numbers. The white media created a bubble and furnished that bubble with all sorts of self-aggrandizing, comforting lies, which of course the black media burst the bubble and then trashed all the furniture. So this year, they're trying a new tactic. This year, they're not going to start off with a black person on the street because they know that the black media has already shot that one down. So they're starting off with their bought and paid for career butter biscuit bootlicks. Representative Gregory Meeks, this clown, he was catching heat from his constituents. That's the reason why he criticized Bloomberg for Stop and Frisk. But this year he thinks he can get away with endorsing Bloomberg. So that's what they start off with. They start off with a career political whore, some clown in Washington. They don't talk about how much pull he's got with his constituents. They say, well, he holds political office, and that's certainly enough. And this is how they start off. They're not starting off with the black man in the street. They're not talking about the black woman in the street. They're not talking about the average black voter. They're talking about people inside the Democratic political machine. This is supposed to be what qualifies as Mike Bloomberg's black support. Absolutely nothing to show that this Meeks guy speaks for anyone other than himself. But USA Today is going to go ahead and tell all sorts of lies, and hopefully your imagination will fill in those gaps. The story says that Meeks' endorsement and that of several other black lawmakers. This is just the very beginning of this propaganda piece. They haven't said a doggone word about black voters who, last time I checked, they're the ones who are going to decide who gets in the White House and who doesn't. But it's a matter of, oh, Michael Bloomberg, he's getting the support of all of these career political prostitutes, these pork chop preachers, and these political pimps, and they're going to tell black folks what to do. And oh, Michael Bloomberg, he's just leaps and bounds getting support. Oh, black people don't care about that stop and frisk. This is the white media attempting to protect and run interference for a racist policy that they want to remain in place. You see that the article says that Bloomberg's endorsement by several black lawmakers suggests that he can change minds. It doesn't say that he's actually changed it. It says suggests that he can. Now, this is confusing to me because the headline is that he's getting black support despite stop and frisk. Well, that's not a suggestion that he can change minds. They're making it sound like he's running the tables. Why, the tide has turned. He's able to do this. Instead, you read the article and it says it suggests that he can. So what they're doing is they got a headline saying that he's doing something that he's not actually doing. We can tell that we have hit a nerve with the white media because look at what they're doing. They're blatantly saying black people don't care about stop and frisk. Yeah, that's the reason why there's a controversy about it, because black people don't care about it. That headline alone doesn't make any sense. How can there be a controversy about stop and frisk among black people if black people don't care about it? See, these guys can't even get their lies straight. But the misimpression, the lie that they're trying to create is that, oh, Mike Bloomberg's getting all this support. But then when you look at it, what you find is he's only got a handful of black politicians among the CBC, mostly, who are saying that they support him, and a couple of sellouts at the local level who he's paid off. But Joe Biden, he still has the endorsement of 18 members of the Congressional Black Talkers. Well, if Biden's got more support among the congressional black talkers than Bloomberg does, the question becomes, why is it not that Biden's got the nomination all sewn up? Well, it's because there's a problem. Joe Biden may have the support of the congressional black talkers, but as USA Today was forced to admit, after you look at Iowa and New Hampshire and the way that he's polling in South Carolina, he has declining level of support among black voters. See, the congressional black talkers are not the ones who actually show up on election day and get you into office. It's the black voters who do, and Joe Biden is hemorrhaging what little black support the white media told him he has. So what it turns out is it doesn't matter how many endorsements you get from these bought and paid for butter biscuit bootlicks. What matters is the black vote on the ground. And the white media has made it clear, before we start trying to mislead you and rewrite history and try to sell you a pack of lies about the black voters, first we're going to try to pump you up with a whole bunch of propaganda that, oh, these black politicians love Mike Bloomberg, so that means that black voters must love him too. Well, we're not going to say that, but it's going to be strongly implied. They tried that same stunt with Biden last year, and you can see what's happened. It did not translate into black voter support. The white media can paint their own fantasies all they want. Black folks ain't drinking the Kool-Aid. Now, the propaganda piece goes on to say that Bloomberg's African-American support was put to the test Tuesday when video resurfaced showing Bloomberg giving a candid defense of stop and frisk. Now, notice the way that they framed this. A candid defense. Gee, did the RNC write this? The alt-right couldn't have come up with a better bit of deflectionary verbiage than that. A candid defense? This is USA Today. A candid defense. Candid. He told bald-faced lies. Black people are responsible for 95% of the crime in any major city. That's a bald-faced lie. That's not a candid defense of stop and frisk. That's racist lies. But this is USA Today, showing you exactly where it is that they stand. This is the white media making it very clear. We need you to see stop and frisk as something other than this is them. This is what goes on around the editorial tables at USA Today and the rest of the white media. They figure that if they downplay and try to whitewash and try to minimize the racism that's being inflicted on black people, then apparently black folks are going to read it and go, yeah, it wasn't racist. It was just a candid defense of policy. How did that work out for Joe Biden and the 94 crime bill? Oh, yeah, it didn't work out. Piece goes on to say the Bloomberg campaign released a statement following a pre-scheduled meeting with over a dozen African-American faith leaders defending the former mayor. So, in just a few paragraphs, we've gone from a member of the Black Congressional Caucus to a few other black lawmakers, and then finally some black faith leaders. In other words, it's the same standard paint by numbers, get the same old usual suspect Negroes, these fools who will do anything to get a free lunch, literally. The same people who are cut from the same cloth as Big Bird. The same clowns who love to brag about how they went to the NAACP winter luncheon and the Urban League spring luncheon and the National Action Committee summer luncheon and the Rainbow Coalition fall luncheon and the Lynx and the Boulay fall fish fry. I mean, this is what these guys do. These clowns who sit around eating all day, looking for some white folks to give them some money so they can have another free lunch. And this is what you get for it. Oh, Mike Bloomberg, he has a mic for Black America in Houston. So he could stand there with a dozen black mayors, including the current city mayor for Houston, Sylvester Turner. Now, the most obvious thing that's wrong about this is a dozen black mayors. Too many of these black mayors do not actually represent the black community. Most of them are trying to put together voter coalitions so that they can circumvent the black vote as much as possible. And secondly, if Mike Bloomberg really wants to impress me, he needs to go to some white areas and put up that mic for Black America and see how that plays in those areas. Oh, that's right. He ain't doing that. Mike for Black America. He's going to Houston with that. He shouldn't have to say that at all. If he's actually putting forward policies that are going to be advantageous for black people, then he should just be able to do that and black people would sing his praises. But what he understands is he has absolutely no trust. He has nothing but contempt in the eyes of the black community. And he's hoping if he can get some bought and paid for bootlick Negroes to stand out in front of him, well, hopefully some black mayors and some black preachers. I mean, look at this pandering stuff, man. This is some of the most shameless, feckless pandering ever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get some black mayors and I'm going to get some black clergy and we're going to get a few cast-offs from the Congressional Black Talkers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that, oh, stop and frisk, I feel your pain. Oh, I just did not understand, but I'm so much more sensitive now, especially since I'm trying to become president. And because of that, you should vote for me. Has he made any restitution for the victims of his policies? Has he gone to any of them, made a formal apology and said, you know what, I was wrong. I got $61 billion and I'm cutting some checks because I understand that I derailed people's lives. I destroyed communities. I devastated neighborhoods and families. I understand that I got to come out of my pocket with this. I got to make amends. And the best amends I can make is cutting the black community a check. No, instead what he did was he ran to some pulpit pimps and some political prostitutes, and he gave them some do-re-mi because these clowns, they'll sell out the black community for pocket change. And that's what he did instead. This is supposed to be Michael Bloomberg's black support. Notice how far into the article we've gotten, and the USA Today ain't said a doggone word about the actual black voters. Haven't said anything about black voters yet. We're still talking about the same old usual suspects. The ones who always turn out every election. You know, they turned out during the 2018 midterms when the Democrats lost. They turned out during the 2016 election when Hillary Clinton lost. They also showed up for John Kerry in 2004 when he lost. And Al Gore in 2000. I mean, you see a pattern forming here. These clowns also showed up for Kamala Harris. How'd that turn out? They showed up for Joe Biden, who is hemorrhaging black voter support. But they're hoping that you don't see a pattern forming. That's what they're hoping for. Now, they go on to quote some professor of political science at Quinnipiac University, some Kalila Brown Dean, and she says that Bloomberg's efforts showed outreach to black communities, something she thought was important. Now, notice we still haven't talked about what black people think. Nobody's asked any black voters what they think. If you want to know how much support Mike Bloomberg's got, you might want to ask his black critics. Wouldn't that just be common sense? Well, let's ask them why it is that they don't support him. No, they don't want that to be the headline, because this is about manufacturing the lie that, well, we need black people to get enthused about voting for one of these Democrat scumbags. So we're going to go ahead and say that, well, black people are just so excited to go vote at the polls. They just don't know who they're going to vote for yet. That's all. Oh, they're going to do it. They just don't know who for. And they don't care about stop and frisk, and they don't care about reparations either, and they don't care about tangibles. No need to mention any of that stuff. Criminal justice reform? That's just a slogan. Well, this Brown Dean woman says that to have a candidate that's trying to bridge that gap has made some people take notice. Well, actually, when she says some people take notice, she's not talking about black voters. She's talking about the Congressional Black Caucus. She's talking about some bootlick black mayors and some pulpit pimps. That's who's taken notice. That there's this rich Jewish guy from New York who apparently is spreading around some do-re-mi. And, well, if you say that you'll go ahead and stand and take a picture with him, he might break you off a little something. That's what they've noticed. The same old game of political prostitution. Well, Alexandria Cortez had something to say about it. And I want you to notice that at this point, this is where USA Today decides to bury the actual statistic that they should have led off this piece with. If you're going to talk a piece about the stop and frisk controversy, then don't you want to at least mention why it is that black people would feel some kind of way about that? This statistic that they gave about the final year of Mike Bloomberg's term as mayor of New York, where 56% of police stops and interrogations were of black people, that should have been at the very beginning. That should have been the very first sentence of this piece. But instead, they buried it halfway down. And it wasn't even about something regarding a quote from a black person. They buried it in the middle of a piece, a section about Alexandria Cortez. That's where they chose to bury it at. This way, if anyone asks, they can always point. USA Today can point and say, well, we mentioned it. See, it's right there. Yeah, but you buried it in a place where people would be least likely to find it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to disconnect this statistic from the black community. That's what they're trying to do, to disconnect that 56%. And they're talking about just the last year in office. Yeah, because it's only the last year that counts. It doesn't matter how many years Bloomberg was in office devastating the black community with these racist anti-black policies. What matters is the last year. That's the only one that counts. We're not going to worry about the other 7 years. You see what the hell they're doing here. This is just blatant anti-black propaganda, and not even very good propaganda. And this lets you know what the white media is up to. These are the lengths that they're willing to go to. And it's going to get worse, by the way, because as we start putting pain on them, they're just going to flat out start saying there are some horrible people online who are trying to derail democracy in America. And they're saying that Michael Bloomberg should be arrested and imprisoned for stop and frisk. And what he did was criminal. And these people are extremists. And where's the government going to go after them? But this is a puff piece for Bloomberg and for the policy of stop and frisk. Because even though they let one quote be put in here from Cortez where she was saying that Bloomberg's apology was insufficient, they then decided that they were going to put in there that Cortez acknowledged, though, I think that no matter what, we're going to have to unify onto the nominee. There will always be concerns, no matter about party unity, no matter who it is. Now, keep in mind, this is the same Alexandria Cortez who says that just because she has some black ancestry, that doesn't make me black. That's Alexandria Cortez. And here she is. The white media wanted to make sure that no matter what tisk that she gave, At the end, her point they finish off with is, well, no matter what, we're going to have to unify onto the nominee, and there's always going to be concerns no matter who it is. So in other words, stop and frisk doesn't matter to Alexandria Cortez. Maybe that's because only 1/3 of the people who were being stopped and interrogated under stop and frisk were Hispanic. And she doesn't see herself as black, so as far as she's concerned, she has absolutely no semblance of human recognition for black people. This is a woman who, after she won office, she was proud to mention everyone except for black people. Ain't but 3 ethnic groups in freaking New York City: blacks, whites, and Hispanics. And as far as she was concerned, I ain't mentioning black people. And speaking of politicians who seem to have a love-hate relationship with the black community, that brings us to Ilhan Omar. And she, according to USA Today, is the only member of the Congressional Black Caucus to have endorsed Bernie the Bigot Sanders so far. Now, apparently she didn't cut Bloomberg any slack. Otherwise, they would have mentioned that. They would have put that in there so they could try to get a blackface who would absolve Bloomberg of his racist crimes. So instead, they just put in there that she said that his apology was absolutely not sufficient. And then a quote saying, I don't think anybody who authorized those kinds of policies should be running for president, but they made sure to mention that she endorsed Sanders. And that's important because when you go to the very next part of this propaganda piece, when asked about Ocasio-Cortez's criticism of Bloomberg, both Meeks and Plaskett cited Sanders' vote for the 1994 crime bill. Now look at that. As soon as you say something critical about Bloomberg, everybody brings up Sanders' support for the 94 crime bill. Well, why didn't anyone bring up Sanders' support for the 94 crime bill back in 2016 or in 2015? It's because the black media had not reached a critical mass. We have reached a critical mass now where instead of merely just being an irritant, we're in a position now whenever you mention Bernie Sanders and the black vote, the white media is not going to say this. It's the black media that forced this to the fore. Instead, what they're going to say is, well, we're going to talk about what they say, but we're not going to mention them because we're damn sure not going to be validating that they've got more influence than we do. But look at it. They're forced to have to mention it. As soon as you bring up Bloomberg, if you want to dirty up Sanders, you mention the 94 crime bill. That's how the white media is giving a tacit admission. Yeah, we know that what you guys have been saying, yes, has been making the rounds, and that even these black bootlicks understand that if they're going to have any semblance of credibility in the black community, they're going to have to mention it too, because everybody's saying it. The black media has now penetrated the blood-brain barrier of political discourse within the black community. But look what this Meeks clown says when it comes to Bloomberg and Sanders' blatant just promotion of the worst anti-black racism. These two have been part and parcel of the turbocharging of the prison industrial complex, which has been the black incarceration state. And what does Representative Meeks say? Does he say it's absolutely unacceptable and black people need to drop out of the election till we get some moral people on the ballot, or at the very least vote for somebody else who didn't vote for the crime bill and didn't institute stop and frisk? No, what does Meeks say? He says none of the candidates have clean hands when it comes to the African American community. Now all of them have work to do. Now you notice that. From Cortez to this Meeks clown, you notice that there is a consistent theme that USA Today is attempting to push. Yeah, these guys are racist, and they've been nothing but a nonstop jihad against the black community. These guys have been waging a racist war against black people, but you know what? None of these people are perfect, and vote for somebody anyway. Now, they would never do any sort of reporting about that, anything like that, if they were talking about LGBT concerns. If they were talking about the LGBTs, they wouldn't be saying something like that. It wouldn't be a matter of so-and-so voted against gay marriage. Well, everybody's got a little dirt on them. Nobody's hands are clean when it comes to the LGBT community. And, well, you're going to have to vote for somebody, so they don't do that. It's a matter of if you didn't vote for gay marriage, you shouldn't be running for president. Oh, you opposed transgender bathrooms? You shouldn't be running for president. That's what it would be, a straight line like that. With the black community, on the other hand, well, no sense crying over spilt blood, especially spilt black blood. So you got to vote for somebody, and the African American community just has to accept the fact that these people don't have clean hands. Yeah, their hands are dirty as hell with black people's blood. Mike Bloomberg doesn't have clean hands because his hands are absolutely filthy with our hallowed blood. That's the problem here. You're right, they don't have clean hands, but why don't you go ahead and tell us what the hell is on their hands? Black blood. That's what's on their hands. That's what's on Bernie Sanders' hands. That's what's on Joe Biden's hands. That's what's on Mike Bloomberg's hands. But this Meeks character, well, he's not concerned about that. And that phrase, when he says all of them have work to do, you know who said that before? George W. Bush in his one and only pandering speech at the Urban League, talking about the Republican Party and their vicious, blatant war against black people, as opposed to the oblique war against black people that the Democrats have been fighting. I remember when W said, look, I understand. we got work to do. No. That is not an admission or a confession, and I require a confession before anything else. You have to admit that you did wrong. But that's not what this is about. This is about whitewashing Michael Bloomberg's racism, and this is about trying to sanitize the racist anti-black policy of stop and frisk. And USA Today is doing everything it can to use the most innocuous language, to try to use the most minimalist language, to try to use the cleanest language in order to describe the dirtiest of policies. And they're trying to create the impression that, well, everyone's made their peace with the fact that, well, Bloomberg did this, he's racist, and, well, we got to vote for somebody, so we can't hold it against him. We can't hold stop and frisk against him. Now, remember, at no point have they actually talked to black people in this piece and found any black folks on the streets who are going to say, yeah, stop and frisk doesn't matter to me, and we got to back this guy. They're still dealing with political prostitutes. They're not talking to the black man and woman on the street. Same way we ran the white media out of the streets of Baltimore and Ferguson, where they found too many black folks who were ambushing them live on air, and they were looking and going, we better retreat back to the cozy confines of our television studios and our network sound stages. We better go ahead and just stay there because it's too hot on the streets. Somebody's getting these black folks in the street codified, and we're hearing all sorts of talking points in language we hadn't heard before. Too many of these black folks are bringing up talking points that neutralize our white lies, so we're stuck. Let's stick to a bunch of black bootlicks who already know what the white media script is, and they'll stay on script. Let's talk to the Simone Mammy Sanders. And let's talk to the Representative Meeks. And let's talk to the corrupt mayor of Houston. Let's go ahead and talk to these clowns. But we ain't talking to the black man or woman on the street because we don't know what they'll say. We can't find any of them who are willing to give a pass to white supremacy's policies because they got a black media out there telling them, getting them on code and telling them no more passes for anyone. Now, of course, there have been other things that Bloomberg has said because this man, he was going on a freaking national tour of anti-black racism during his time as mayor of New York. The little interview that he did in that radio station, that was just one of his sins. So there's actually a bunch of them, but the white media, the USA Today, they decided they were going to just end it by saying, well, AP reported on Bloomberg's remarks at a 2008 Georgetown University forum where he had said that the end of redlining had contributed to the 2008 economic collapse. Imagine that. This is supposed to be a freaking media mogul and a real estate guy, and he blames the 2008 economic collapse on the end of redlining. First of all, redlining never stopped. So that's lie number one. Redlining is still going on. And two, the 2008 economic collapse had to do with real estate speculation. It had to do with Wall Street deciding to use the real estate market as a casino. Redlining had nothing to do with that. If he's talking about black people actually being able to get their hands on resources when it comes to home ownership, that had nothing to do with the 2008 economic collapse because black people don't constitute a large enough amount of real estate buying or selling to be able to bring down the economy. You need rich white men like a Donald Trump or a Michael Bloomberg, somebody like that, somebody who deals in the tens of millions, somebody who does these big real estate projects. That's where the problem would come in with these people, these home builders and such, who are just building all these homes and nobody's and putting them on huge prices. And people thinking to themselves, especially white people who have the money to be able to get these things, and thinking, I'm going to get this house and sell it in a year or two and make a mint. That's what brought about the 2008 economic collapse. So Bloomberg, he doesn't know that black people are not responsible for 95% of the crime. He doesn't know what brought about the 2008 economic collapse. Oh, but he wants to be president, though, because he knows so much about the country. If only Joy Reid and the good folks over at MSNBC weighed in on that, why, I'm sure they could clear up some of this stuff for us. They always shoot straight with the black community, now don't they? Oh, good news. Apparently Meeks was on MSNBC yesterday, and he said that Bloomberg used a poor choice of language when he said that the end of redlining brought about the 2008 economic collapse. Oh, but he was referring to the correct issue. Now, this Meeks guy, man, Newt Gingrich couldn't have said this any better. This Meeks guy, he might as well stop faking and just go ahead and declare his candidacy to be the Republican candidate for his district. Because that's what he's doing. You see what he has to do in order to keep the favor of white supremacy. He's supposed to be a Democrat, but he runs around defending policies that actually are injurious to black people. And then when you got somebody who is blaming black people or blaming something that is seen as advantageous to black people, because it's not, nobody actually believes that redlining or the end of redlining, even as a hypothetical, had anything to do with the 2008 economic collapse. That's nothing more than code wording. What everyone understands is Bloomberg saying that, well, if black people are able to get a fair shake when it comes to bank loans and such, why, that's a bad thing. That's what it really means. It's not a matter of whether or not he's factually correct. Everybody knows that he's factually wrong, just like his phony baloney crime stat. But what everyone understands is he's saying we need to make sure that the economic distribution of wealth in the country never changes. And black people must be corralled into the poorest areas, and we have to make sure it stays that way. So I'm giving my full support to the banks to blatantly discriminate against black people. That's what he's saying, and everybody understands that's what he's saying. And for this Meeks clown to try to minimize it and say it was a poor choice of language. Poor choice of language? No, for somebody to say ain't is a poor choice of language. Michael Bloomberg's giving an open declaration of anti-black racism. He's giving the green light to the banks. You vote for me, and you better believe that a Bloomberg Department of Justice is going to give a wink and a nod to all the racist, blatantly racist discrimination you want to do against black people. Doesn't matter how good their credit score is. Doesn't matter how much collateral they've got. It doesn't matter how much of a down payment they got. It'll never be good enough. I'm giving you the green light. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. When I get in there, it's going to be you can just go ahead and do anything you want against black people because Michael Bloomberg ain't going to do a damn thing about it. He's on the side of the racists. That's what he was saying. And this Meeks clown went on MSNBC and co-signed it. And he tries to clean it up by saying Bloomberg wasn't talking about trying to make sure that black people couldn't live in certain neighborhoods. What the hell is redlining about? Does he even know? These are the kind of lies that you get reduced to when you're a black bootlick. You got to deny reality because that's the cost of those butter biscuits. Now, USA Today decides that they were going to embellish some of Meek's little irrational rantings because they only give like a partial quote from him, but the rest of it is what USA Today is saying. What Meeks said Bloomberg meant was that Congress pushed the banks to give loans. Okay, where's the rest of the quote? I want to see the rest of the quote. There isn't one. It's USA Today paraphrasing. And do you want to make any avowals as to the accuracy of this? Congress pushed the banks to give loans, and then USA Today says, to people who would not be able to pay them back, like many residents of his district. That's USA Today taking a direct shot at this Meeks character's district, which is basically black. Now, they don't say black people, but they make it very clear. This is USA Today talking here. Congress pushed the banks to give loans to people who would not be able to pay them back. No, what happened was they gave a free ride to speculators in the real estate market. And they also incentivized a bunch of would-be builders who had no business building anything. The banks were simply trying to create the idea of irrational profit being made from real estate. That's the whole meaning of a bubble. And then when it burst, well, we're going to blame black people for it. Black people do not constitute enough wealth, could not get enough loans, it did not have anywhere near enough of an impact to bring down the freaking financial market. But this is their lie, and they're sticking to it. Like many residents of Meek's district. This is the white media going full Nazi. This is the white media trying to sweet talk you into believing that you should do what they say, that black people are voting for this. This is what they say black people support. This is supposed to be Mike Bloomberg's black support. Individuals who are blatantly defending redlining, blatantly defending stop and frisk. And Mike Bloomberg doesn't come out to defend his racist rantings. Instead, he sends this Meeks clown to do it. That's something else you need to notice. Notice how they don't actually have Bloomberg out here saying, well, let me tell you what I meant by that redlining business. They don't send him out. They send this Meeks character. Yeah, somebody's thinking to themselves that they're going to get a check from Bloomberg, or maybe they'll get an administration post or something. USA Today's propaganda piece goes on to say Bloomberg has surged among black voters in some recent polling. A Quinnipiac poll had him in second place behind Biden, and an Economist YouGov poll had him in third place behind Biden and Sanders. Now, let's talk about that, because now, finally, 2/3 of the way through their propaganda piece, USA Today finally gets around to actually mentioning black voters, but they use weasel words. This is a classic, by the way, because I looked at these two polls from Quinnipiac and The Economist. By the way, The Economist is the same publication that published that infamous racist cover about 25 years ago calling Africa the hopeless continent. So just understand, when you're talking about The Economist here and black people, you're not talking about a publication that holds black people in high regard. You're talking about a stomp down anti-black rag. And this is who USA Today is getting their information from. And it makes sense because USA Today is now putting on the full Klan robes and their pointy dunce cap. But in the Quinnipiac poll, the question that was asked was not do you prefer Bloomberg compared to the other Democratic candidates? That's not the way the question was framed. The question was asked, do you prefer Bloomberg over Donald Trump? And what USA Today didn't mention was Quinnipiac's polling found that when asked about Bloomberg, he was the second most likely for black respondents to say that they either didn't know if they would vote for him or wouldn't vote for him at all. Of all the candidates, he was the second highest that black people said either they didn't know if they were going to vote for him or that they wouldn't vote for him at all. Only Pete Buttigieg had more black respondents who said they didn't know or would stay home when asked about whether they vote for him. So you see, it's all about how you frame the reporting. You can take practically any stats and make it look however you want if you're careful about how you frame it. And it gets even more interesting when you look at the polling internals. You see that Quinnipiac had asked the black respondents about whether they held a favorable or unfavorable view of Bloomberg. 60% of black respondents said that they had a favorable view of him, according to this very same poll, 60%. Well, 65% of black respondents to the poll said that they had a favorable view of Elizabeth Warren. That's 5% more than Bloomberg. 72% of black respondents said they saw Joe Biden favorably. 72%, that's 12% more than Bloomberg. And 80% of black respondents said that they saw Bernie Sanders favorably. That's 20% more than Bloomberg. But apparently favorability, which used to be the coin of the realm last year, apparently the coin of the realm's been somewhat devalued now, because USA Today says that Bloomberg is in second place behind Biden, but they're talking about when asked, who would you vote for vis-a-vis Donald Trump? But when you ask whether or not black folks have a favorable opinion of Bloomberg, 60%, only 60% say that they do. Only 60%. And the guy just got into the race. Black folks don't even know anything about him yet. Because it gets even worse when you look at how Bloomberg stands when it comes to an unfavorable view. 11% of black respondents said that they held an unfavorable view of Mike Bloomberg. 11%. Now, that number is about in the middle compared to other Democratic candidates in this poll. But what makes it so damaging is that 29% of black respondents said they hadn't heard enough about Bloomberg to say one way or the other what they thought about him. Now, with the other candidates, their numbers have solidified. So it's not as if black people, there's this large number of black folks who are still undecided as to what they think, as to whether or not they like Sanders or like Biden or like Warren. They pretty much made up their minds on that score. But with Bloomberg, doesn't matter that he was mayor of New York. And New York, by the way, is a sizable black population, but it doesn't matter that he was mayor of New York. You have 1 out of 3 black respondents who said that they didn't even know enough about this worm to say whether they even liked him or not. But that's among black voters in general. When you look at the numbers for those who admit to being Democrats or Democrat leaning, Bloomberg comes in 4th behind Biden, Sanders, and Warren. So it's a little premature to say that Bloomberg is surging when fully 1 out of 3 black respondents don't even know enough about him to say whether or not they like him. Little premature, isn't it? But this is about manufacturing consent. This is about manufacturing some sort of favorability about him. And the Economist YouGov poll had 57% of black respondents who said that they had a somewhat or very favorable opinion of Joe Biden. And that's important because the way that USA Today reports it, they claim that the YouGov poll had him in 3rd place. Well, the problem is that's only if you go with which black respondents said that they had a very favorable opinion of Bloomberg. If you look at just favorable overall, which is favorable or somewhat favorable, then all of a sudden the numbers change. 54% of black respondents said that they had a somewhat or very favorable opinion of Bernie Sanders. 49% said they had a somewhat or very favorable opinion of Elizabeth Warren. Bloomberg comes in 4th with only 42% having a somewhat or very favorable opinion of him. So when you look at it, he's not actually 3rd, he's actually 4th. But you know what? There's also another way that we can look at this. Let's look at this from the other end. Let's look at, according to the Economist YouGov's poll, let's look at Bloomberg's unfavorability among black voters. 21% see Warren as somewhat or very unfavorable. 22% of black respondents see Bernie that way. 22% see Biden that way, while Bloomberg had 27% of black respondents who either saw him very unfavorably or just somewhat unfavorably. And just like with the Quinnipiac poll, over 30% of respondents said they didn't know if they liked Bloomberg or not. Now, when you put those numbers together, the 27% who said that they had either a somewhat or very unfavorable view of him, plus the 30% who didn't even know, you come up with 59%, almost 3 out of 5 black respondents who said that they either didn't like Bloomberg or didn't even know what to make of him. The white media knows 59%, that's a long way for Bloomberg to fall. And he just got into the race yesterday, and it's not like he's got a ton of time to be able to build up his black support and try to get black people to forget about his 8-year reign of terror against the black community in New York and his endless anti-black racism and vitriol. The white media knows that. So you need to look and ask how many black folks either look at him unfavorably or haven't even figured out what to make of him. 59%. Kind of puts the numbers in perspective. Now it makes a lot more sense when USA Today was saying that it suggests that his standing was suggesting that he was making some progress with the black vote. That being able to get these black bootlicks to take a photo op with him, well, it suggests that he can change minds. Now you understand why they were saying suggest, because when you look at the numbers, it's showing that, well, there's not a whole lot to actually base that on. But you know what? Of course, USA Today, yellow journalism rag that it is, they decided to parse the data, so I'm going to parse it too. Looking only at the very unfavorable ratings for the candidates among black voters, Warren was 8% very unfavorable. Bernie is 6% very unfavorable. Biden is 9% very unfavorable. And Bloomberg is 11% very unfavorable. So Bloomberg has the highest unfavorable rating among black voters, according to an Economist YouGov poll. See, the way that you report the stats makes all the difference in the world. It's what I was telling you about a couple of days ago with Heather McDonald and her fiction book, The War on Cops. You see, what's going on here with the white media and their so-called statisticians' practice, this is what's called statisticulation. What statisticulation means is you start off with your own preconceived conclusion, and then you proceed to mangle whatever available data you've got until you get the numbers to say what you want them to say. And USA Today decided to do one better than that. Not only did they engage in some blatant statisticulation, but they also decided that they were going to just flat out lie. We're going to go ahead and get some pork chop preachers and some political prostitutes, and they're going to say that they love Michael Bloomberg and they don't hold Stop and Frisk against him. And well, granted, we don't have any black voters who say that stupidity, but that's okay. We got some black politicians here, and I'm sure that they weren't paid to say that. I'm sure that these guys, Bloomberg didn't give them anything and didn't promise them anything. They're saying it because they actually believe it. They're saying it out of genuine conviction, right? Which is why their constituents aren't saying it. The white media understands that there's a pattern forming. Ever since Kamala Harris, whenever the black media locks onto a candidate and begins beating the drum, that candidate's numbers plummet. That's what they've seen with Joe Biden. They're hoping that these phony feel-good stories about Bloomberg will create a false impression that black people are ignoring what the black media says, and hopefully black folks will vote for one of these clowns anyway. The white media is used to that. As far as they're concerned, if we say something, that makes it true. If we say it, it exists. And if we ignore it, then it doesn't exist. That's what they're used to. Yeah, well, how has that been working for them, huh? What they're hoping is they're hoping to head off what it is that we did to Kamala Harris and what we've done to Joe Biden. We cut that bastard off at the knees. Because as USA Today was forced to report, Biden had finished in 5th place in New Hampshire, but his black support has been dropping since the last time that the polls were conducted. That's important because they're sitting here talking about Mike Bloomberg, and he just jumped into the race. And I'm sure as Bloomberg sees it, with a little bit of help from the white media, of which he is a part, Bloomberg happens to be a media mogul, so he's in the best position to be able to talk to these other media heads, these other presidents of these media companies, these other media CEOs and executives and producers and such, and tell them, hey, guys, put in the good word for me, huh? There'll be some favor. Hey, the FCC is going to go real easy on you. Yeah, I should know. I'm a media guy too. We gotta look out for each other. Media guys got to stick together. And that's what Bloomberg's saying to the media powers that be. Go ahead and give them a little bit of help right now. Help them shore up some of that black support. Give them some favorable headlines, and the FCC will be real friendly come election day. They'll be real friendly after he gets sworn in. But between now and then, there's a whole bunch of lies that have to be told. And apparently, one of the biggest liars is going to be this Representative Meeks character. He told USA Today that African American voters wanted a candidate who can... Now, wait, before I read this, wait for it. What do you think that Meeks said? Do you think he said that African American voters want a candidate who's going to bring us our tangibles? That we want a candidate who is going to bring us our reparations, a candidate who's going to pledge us our tangibles, the money and resources that we require and that we are owed for our ancestors' sacrifice and for the economic deprivation we have endured for 150 years after the alleged end of chattel slavery? Is that because that's what African Americans have been saying? So I'm sure that's what Representative Meeks said is the most important thing. That's what African American voters want, right? That's what he said. He said that black voters want an end to stop and frisk, and they want the punishment of the police and DAs who carried it out. And they also want to make sure the politicians who promoted these policies get held to account. Because that's what the black people in the streets have been saying. So I'm sure that's what Meeks said, right? That's what's important for black folks. Tangibles first. And dismantling the prison industrial complex is a close second, right? I'm sure that's exactly what he said, right? No, what he said is African American voters want a candidate who can restore some sense of sanity here in Washington, D.C. This Meeks clown is supposed to be the representative of Queens, one of the representatives in Queens. And yet, what's his priority? His priority is not Queens. His priority is Washington, D.C. Well, you can tell where he actually lives at as opposed to where he has to get his political support from. This guy is so divorced, so detached from his home constituency. As far as he's concerned, his home is not Queens. His home is D.C. He's not concerned about what's happening to black folks in Queens. He's concerned about restoring some sense of sanity in Washington, D.C. That's his priority. Not Queens, not even New York City, but Washington, D.C. Restore some sense of sanity. What does that mean? What that means is make sure that these good white liberals are perfectly pleased with the status quo. And the black vote, well, they'll just bask in the warm glow of knowing that these good white liberals are finally getting their way in D.C. We don't need tangibles. In fact, we don't even deserve them. And what about redlining? Well, black folks, they understand that it's for their own good. What about stop and frisk? Well, we put up with it this long. We're sure that a few hundred more years of it won't bother us. Whoever this Meeks clown is, I wonder who the idiots are who voted for this chucklehead. But you see how this guy, he's not even on planet Earth. He damn sure isn't in Queens, that's for sure. But these guys are proud of how detached and separated they are from the very black constituents who they're supposed to be serving. He's proud of the fact that as far as he's concerned, he has escaped blackness. He's certainly escaped black people as he sees it. And he's not alone. Representative Cedric Richmond, one of the CBC members. Hey, you guys remember that Richmond character? I told you about him in my video that you guys can find in the archives of this channel, talking about exposing the Congressional Black Caucus, why they never do anything for us. You go and look. I showed you how that Representative Cedric character, this guy actually was out there talking and caping and campaigning, not for black people's interests, but for the interests of immigrants. This in Louisiana where Hurricane Katrina went down. But Cedric Richmond, he wasn't concerned about that. He's concerned about Southeast Asian immigrants. We got to protect them from deportation. They play a major role in my district and in cities all across America. You notice that theme forming over and over again? Anytime these guys are talking, they're not talking about the black community's interests. They're talking about all over America, for all Americans, all over this country. What about for black people? What about them? So the exact same callous disregard and dismissal that you get from Elizabeth Warren, that you get from Bernie the bigot Sanders, you also see it coming from this Representative Meeks and Representative Richmond. But USA Today, in spite of themselves, they put in something that reveals the truth about Joe Biden and also reveals the coming fall of Bloomberg. Richmond, who by the way is working on Biden's campaign, what a surprise, he told USA Today that far more black lawmakers had endorsed Biden than Bloomberg, but he acknowledged the effects of Bloomberg's massive spending. Well, Joe Biden's numbers have been plummeting among black voters long before Bloomberg got into the race. So I know how the white media is very desperate that they're not about to attribute the changing of the political landscape to the black media and intelligent black society and the fact that we are moving the tectonic plates. They're not about to do that. So instead, it's a matter of, well, we're going to say that it's Bloomberg spending. That's what's happening here. Yeah, because Joe Biden's numbers were just fine before Bloomberg got into the race, right? He wasn't sinking fast before then. He certainly didn't have a black voter problem before then. But black folks, this is what we got to deal with when it comes to these political prostitutes in public office. Ilhan Omar supports Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders voted for the '94 crime bill and the bastard opposes our reparations. Representative Richmond and Simone Sanders, these two worked for the Biden campaign, completely and thoroughly overlooking the fact that Joe Biden did not merely vote for the '94 crime bill, he wrote the '94 crime bill. And he used to brag about it as Biden's law. He was proud of it before. But that wasn't enough for Joe Biden. He also helped to sponsor and push the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. That was the law that created the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack cocaine vis-a-vis rock cocaine. That's what Joe Biden put on the books. But Representative Richmond and Simone Sanders, they don't have a problem with that. See, there seems to be no amount of anti-black racism that's enough for these guys to say, you know what, I can't support you under any circumstances. It doesn't seem to matter what anti-black law or policies these clowns carry out. There always seems to be some ready phalanx of Negroes who are willing to cape for these clowns and carry water for them and to excuse away their lies. And it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is, because Representative Meek's idiotic dissembling and his mumbling and babbling and stumbling and bumbling, that doesn't accrue to Michael Bloomberg. That accrues to Meeks, and Bloomberg can always say, well, I wasn't the one who actually said that. It was this Meeks guy who said it, and see, what I really meant was, but of course, Bloomberg's going to stay as far away from this as possible. Meek's job is to be Bloomberg's crash dummy. So I'm going to close this out simply by saying, family, we have been having an impact on this election. We've been having the intended result. We wanted to make sure that our voices are heard, and they are being heard. The bad guys are shook. So much so that they don't know whether to spit or go blind. They got headlines that make absolutely no sense on their face. You cannot in one breath say that Mike Bloomberg is getting black support despite Stop and Frisk controversy, and then at the same time, you're not saying that he's winning. It doesn't work that way. If he's getting black support, then that means there's no controversy. If there's controversy, that means he can't possibly be getting black support. Why would you even bring it up then? Why mention it? If apparently the so-called controversy is not having any impact on Bloomberg, then why bother bringing it up? It's a non-issue. So apparently it must be an issue to some degree or another. USA Today's looked at this and saying, well, apparently it's having some sort of impact. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reporting on it. They'd be talking about something else, but they're not. As the white media sees it, they've got to now prove that they are able to drown out the new voices of black media. That's what they're hoping to do. And South Carolina, as they see, it's going to be their first big test. It doesn't matter which of the racist candidates running on the Democrats happens to get the nomination. One of them's going to regardless, because they got to put somebody on the ticket. But what they're concerned about is the fact that these guys are being damaged and exposed, and what that means long term, because they understand what the black media is doing. This is not about Biden, Bernie, or Bloomberg, not in the strictest sense. Sure, it's about them as individuals to a large extent, to punish them for their individual crimes that they carried out as in their role as operatives for white supremacy and the anti-black racism that they've prosecuted against us. Sure, we're looking to punish them specifically as individuals. That's part of it. But the truth of the matter is, we would be doing this no matter who was on the ticket. If Hillary was up there, if Barack Obama was able to run for a third term, we would still be doing the exact same thing. This is about reshaping the political profile of this country. This is about making black officially part of the political discourse in American politics. This is about making it where black is no longer a dirty word when it comes to elections. When it comes to talking about who's going to get what, you don't get to treat us like a dirty word anymore. That's what we're doing. We're going to condition these bastards that you're going to say black, you're going to be saying black first, and it's going to be exclusively for blacks, because as there has been exclusive directed punishment for black people, yeah, there's going to be exclusive directed benefits for black people. I didn't see anyone saying that because Jews were able to get special treatment from the U.S. government, that black people should get it too. In fact, they said exactly the opposite. They said, well, this is the worst crime in human history. Not true, but go ahead with that. Native Americans got reparations. Nobody said, well, black people should get it too. After all, they've endured more than Native Americans ever had. And by the way, many Native Americans not only helped in the enslavement of black people, but they actually owned black people as slaves. Nobody talks about that. Japanese get reparations, nobody brings up black people. But as soon as it's time to talk about black people, well, only if it's something for everyone. Now, we're going to break you of the habit of trying to make sure that there's some one-size-fits-all, everybody gets something if black people do. We're going to break you of that habit. And we're going to break you of the habit by breaking you, period. The white media can play this little game all they want of, we're going to say that Mike Bloomberg's getting black support, and we're not going to make a big deal of the fact that it's only from politicians, and we'll throw in some phony baloney poll after we get through using weasel words and statisticulation, and we're going to reframe it and try to make it into something that it's not. By the time we're done, why, you'll think that black people can't wait to vote for Bloomberg, because what we got to do is we got to stop this attack on these policies that we use to control these niggers. That's what's going on in USA Today, and it's also what's going on at MSNBC and CNN and ABC and New York Times and all the rest of them. These are the policies that allow a Michael Bloomberg to become a $61 billion man. These are the policies that allow for Joy Reid to have a job that she clearly is unqualified for and shouldn't even have. This is what allows a Representative Cedric Richmond to pretend to be a representative from black people, or a Representative Meeks who represents no one but himself, who doesn't know where the hell his constituents are at, but he does know that he's in D.C. and that's all that matters. The only way that a system this corrupt can continue to exist is if you have the masses being blatantly, categorically miseducated and misinformed. You have got to have an extremely sophisticated and robust disinformation organ pumping out the propaganda and the lies. It's a job tailor-made for the white media. But what's happening is, as the black media starts beating the drum, the numbers for these guys fall. And it doesn't matter which one of them sustains the least amount of damage. That's basically what they're fighting for here. They're not fighting to see which one gets the most. It's going to be a matter of which one is still not on life support by the time the black media is done with them. Because they know that we're going to destroy their black support. And the clowns like that, Meeks, can get out there and say black people are more concerned about getting Donald Trump out of office than anything else. They can try that mess, but it won't work. Didn't work for Kamala Harris. Didn't work for Cory Booker. Didn't work for Andrew Yang. It's not worked for Joe Biden, and it won't work for Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg in particular, they have to protect this guy. They got to support him. They got to boost for him. They got to get out here and do this because he represents the racist policies that have ensured their absolutely undeserved goodies, guarantees, and giveaways under white supremacy. So they have to boldly support him precisely because of his racist policies. They cannot afford to say that Stop and Frisk must be punished. They cannot afford to say that Michael Bloomberg must go down for this because they need these policies. So instead, it's a matter of lie. Just lie. Lie. The bigger the lie, the better. And don't worry about punishment for the lie, because clowns like this Representative Meeks, he's going to be the one who carries the brunt of it. But what they don't understand is the black media has been conditioning black people. Do not merely look at the black puppet that they put out front. Look at who's got that black puppet on strings. That's the reason why it was so important to me to have some people step to Deborah Martin Chase to let her know, yeah, we see Cynthia Erivo, but we also see who sent her too. So she understood, yeah, you thought that Cynthia Erivo was the lightning rod. Nah, it ain't just the lightning rod. It's the fool who's holding that lightning rod who's going to get zapped too. And Gail Skank, she not only got called out, but what happened was people started saying, now, what about all of these white sexual predators that Gail King has absolutely conveniently has no interest in whatsoever? What about them? And with Mike Bloomberg, yeah, Mike Bloomberg's going to get that work, but also his racist policies will too. Joe Biden's getting that work because of the 94 crime bill. What's happening is these guys are being forced, because of the work that we've done, they're being forced to use our talking points as a means to try to discredit each other. But what they're also thinking they're going to do is they're thinking that they're going to set the stage for, we have, as Democrats, we've got our own internal disputes, but we all understand that nothing matters more than getting the orange guy out of the White House. No, that's not true. Nothing matters more than black people's tangibles, the former slaves of this country getting our due, getting what's ours. Nothing matters more than that. And if you're not bringing that to the table, then we could give less than a damn if Donald Trump stays in the White House 100 more years. Means nothing to us. And if Mike Bloomberg is going to be the nominee, then you might as well go ahead and give him a complimentary swastika and some KKK robes to go along with it, because this bastard spent 8 years lying about black people, 8 years boldly saying that we need to lock up more black people, not less. 8 years defending redlining, defending the selective discriminatory arresting and harassment of black people, and specifically saying more black people need to be in jail. Black people commit all the crime in America. And this bastard wants to be the presidential nominee. I'm sitting here going, well, hell, what's the difference between him and what they say about Trump? No difference at all. You have a blatant racist as opposed to an over-the-top blatant racist. Well, to me, that's a distinction without a difference. And no amount of propaganda pieces from USA Today, no amount of comfy little friendly interviews on MSNBC or the Klan Nazi Network is going to cover up that fact. Go ahead and keep lying to yourselves, white media, because we know that you watch what we say. We know that you monitor what we say. So go ahead and monitor this. The same way that we broke the back of Kamala Harris's campaign, the same way that we crippled Cory Booker right out of the gate, the same way that we have been an anvil dragging Jim Crow Joe Biden down, the same way that we have now made it where anytime you want to check Bernie Sanders, you bring up the 94 crime bill, just showing the hypocrisy of that bastard. And do not think, though, that you're going to be able to deflect onto that as a means of not discussing our reparations. Our tangibles are always going to be center stage. That will always be priority one. But it's just a matter of, before anybody gets ready to try to treat Michael Bloomberg as some sort of one-off, don't forget that the three guys who are supposed to be the front runners, these three white males, all three of them have a horrifying track record of being the most racist, anti-black bigots in politics. All of them have decades-long records of anti-black policies. And as soon as you start talking about doing something for black people, all three of them say, what for? Why should we? I don't think so. And as more black people hear about Mike Bloomberg's record, what's going to happen is his numbers will crater as well. The white media is thinking to themselves that, well, if we just stick to talking to friendly audiences, and if we just go ahead and say that there's black pastors and such, you know how simple-minded those niggers are. They'll go for it. Just show them a couple of pastors. If they see a couple of their own out there, they'll understand that, oh, that's stop and frisk. That's kind of a New York thing. And, well, Mike Bloomberg's made apologies for that. And why? You got these corrupt mayors, some of them thinking that they're going to be presidential staffers one day, or that there's going to be a cabinet position, or there's going to be a department position with their names on it. Because that's what they're really doing. You got these black mayors and such, they're campaigning for an administrative post. They're campaigning to either be director of this or deputy director of that or deputy secretary of this, or perhaps, oh my stars and garters, maybe an ambassadorship. That's what these clowns are hoping for. That's what they're campaigning for. So please don't think that they're doing this simply because, merely out of complete and thorough contempt for the black community. They're also doing it because they think that they're going to get paid back through policy. Well, the only thing that they're actually going to get is exposed. And as Michael Bloomberg's numbers begin to fall, the white media is going to be wondering, what the hell do we do about this? Yeah, the only reason that his numbers have not gone through the floor yet is because A, he hadn't jumped into the race yet, and B, the black media had not come down on him yet. We had not had enough time to be beating the drum, but there's plenty of time between now and the summer. Plenty of time indeed. And watch as the headlines from USA Today and the rest of the white media begin to change. Right now, they're saying that he's getting black support despite Stop and Frisk. But before long, it's going to be that Stop and Frisk continues to be an issue. Nagging doubts about Stop and Frisk persist. That's what's coming next. Stop and Frisk concerns persist despite Bloomberg's reassurances. That's what comes next. The doubts persist despite ... And then eventually it's going to become just like with Kamala Harris. Well, Bloomberg simply couldn't overcome the concerns about Stop and Frisk. They're never going to say that he was wrong. They're never going to say the black community brought him down, led by the black media. They're never going to say that. Instead, it's going to be something other. It's going to be, well, it's a policy. Mostly white liberals didn't like it. White liberals didn't approve, you see. They didn't. It was white liberals who did. Liberal-minded voters. They cannot afford to say that intelligent black society led by the black media is now in the driver's seat. They cannot afford to say, oh my God, they just broke Michael Bloomberg's back. His billions of dollars did him no good. They could not say that the black media destroyed Kamala Harris, because they would also be admitting that the white media was unable to neutralize the influence of the black media. So don't expect them to ever come up with the admission. But you know what? They don't have to. We are not chasing white media attention. We're not looking for white media approval or validation. The same way that we are not expecting for the Bernie the Bigots, the Jim Crow Joe Bidens, or the Mike Bloombergs to give us any validation. We're not looking for the white media to do it either. We're pursuing our own agenda. And crushing white supremacy's operatives and mouthpieces along the way, that's going to be the cost of doing business.